I think so. We usually take a summer break. So I think this is the last one, the last meeting of the whole group until probably September, unless we decide we want to have interstitial design team meetings for the pilot startup and planning. And so maybe at the end of this meeting, we can have, one of the goals can be picking who has time during the summer and who wants to be part of the smaller group to inform the detailed pilot development. But aside from that announcement, for those of you who are kind of new, we usually take summer off.
North American summer.
The North American summer, right? Because we have a lot of Europeans on the call and they just generally disappear.
Really?
In our American brains, they do. But
Embry, is that the only work this summer? Is the pilot development project? I was thinking about this earlier this morning. It's the only thing I could get my arms around, other than tracking our grants and award, things that we've got out there.
yeah, and rooting around for some more.
Robin has some publishing news, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I think, Lynn, you said you'd been away a few of these meetings. I apologize. I have as well. I've had to skip a few, and I'm afraid today I've only got the 1 hour as well. But yeah, I did see I was on the agenda, so I thought there was a real risk I wasn't going to make it at all today. So I did send Embry, I sent you a note.
Yeah.
As publishing, you said specifically, yeah, I've been invited to write another short article about the objectives of this group. So I was going to use the information today to do that, unless anybody says, no, don't do that. I was just going to get on and lead it. But I did, Embry, suggest that we do something probably a little bit more detailed with, I want to include a little bit of information from Tom in particular about the biology of what we need in a cold, in a cold active AD process, because I think we need to not just be seen to be building just another unit somewhere in a different location, but from a technical point of view, the objective is very much one of the cold part of what we do. Yeah. So I want to reel Tom in on it for a few wise words, but also make sure that we've got some real life examples from Jaime's work as well, from his previous work.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We probably should have Jaime on there too. Yeah. It's funny because I have been yelling at not yelling. I've been gently reminding the digester cohort here at my company, psychrophilic digestion can produce methane too. I'm trying to gently sort of like nudge it, but they just want to set stuff on fire with pyrolysis and all kinds of things.
So my deadline is the end of June, so it's only really 6 weeks, but it won't be too difficult to cram that from my point of view.
How many words, Robin?
Sorry?
How many words?
Oh, it's only 600, I think it's really, but with images and so on. It's very much a PR article from our point of view. And then it just goes on anybody's CV within the group is the whole purpose once again. So that's it really. That's the only publication news relating to this at the moment.
Margaret, is it okay to mention the pilot in that published article or the inception of it, or we don't need to would we have to have the EPA do some sort of like review of it and in like a publication review, or could we mention it?
I mean, I think we can certainly say that it's in the plans. Anything we do unless we're told it's confidential business information, which this definitely isn't because it's all us, is public.
Yeah, it's public knowledge, isn't it? The award of the grant for that.
Yeah.
So,
It's public knowledge, but I feel like the EPA has like a review process before even public information is promulgated. And so.
Right. No, the results would have to go through
Okay,
the review, but we haven't, sadly.
okay, all right.
okay. Well, I'll ask you for some specific questions about that offline. We won't do that now. But just in terms of project reference numbers and stuff like that and objectives, and if you can point me to anything that's available maybe on the EPA website where I can just refer to that. That's all. Once it's in that domain, that's all. We'll make that connection. We won't claim ownership of it or anything. Okay.
Sounds good. So we have Monica Shimamura here. I know that Jaime can't join for another 20 minutes and then Embry has to drop off in 20 minutes, which is kind of awkward because everybody wants to hear Monica. So we might have to make her repeat herself a little.
That's fine.
But yeah, I agree. Reminding people that psychophilic is a thing is a thing. I feel like I have that conversation remarkably often, you know, the same conversation about yes, I understand that you work very hard to keep your bugs at a mesophilic or even warmer level, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way. I don't know. Does that come up for you, Monica?
Not as much. We don't get as technical so far, as you'll hear from us or from me from the presentation.
I said, do you want to introduce Monica now, or is she on the agenda later on?
I had her up first, but
Perfect. Embry? Something?
Well, Alex has his hand raised real quick before.
Oh
we
yeah, sorry, Alex, you're up in my corner.
Am I wearing little wings like a fairy?
You are. No, it's a halo today.
So maybe this relates to Robin's paper, which this is great, Robin, go forth and write. And I appreciate that. And to what we were just talking about, psychophilic is a thing. And then the other thing I've been sort of saying is, like, given time to transition, the biology of the digester will adjust. And I think that's in Jaime's work as well. So that's another way to talk about it. It's like any system, right? Biological system, it just takes time for the bugs to colonize, and maybe that's too technical, Monica, but anyhow, that's sort of how I have been talking about it or thinking about it. Psychophilic works, and you can go back and forth as long as there's time, which there is. You know, we have a season. Yeah, it's like warm here, but then, yeah, never mind. And one other thing, I guess, when we keep saying pilot, I'm sorry, can you refresh me what that is again?
sure. We EPA, that is to say, first we had a bench scale test, and that was successful. And we have gotten the tiny amount of internal research money that is available to build a digester at the National Renewable Energies Lab facility in Fairbanks. And then the hope was to have it already constructed before the thaw. Unfortunately, Fairbanks is thawed. And then make sure it's working all through the summer, and then freeze it, and then see how long it takes to start again in the following freeze. The issue has just been, apparently we have 3 sets of federal lawyers involved, EPA's, the National Renewable Energies Lab, and the Department of Energy. I'm not sure why we need all 3, but we do apparently. And everyone has standard terms and conditions, and the standard terms and conditions aren't standard enough. So it's been stalled. And while it's been stalled, we got an extra little bit of money, which is also good news, because that should take us, we're hoping that'll take us through 2 cycles. And we're also hoping to get it all on the same interagency agreement, so we don't have to go through this twice. But it's there, it exists. Soon the pilot will exist. The National Renewable Energies Lab project manager gets back from a trip to Asia tomorrow, I think. So
is there a design, or when will there be a design?
that is the
Somewhere would be
question.
good.
Okay, all right, fine. I just
We've
wanted to
been-
get a
we've been
sense. We don't need
trying
to
to-
get into any detail about it, but I now have a better sense. Thank you.
We've been trying, I think, to start fleshing that out, but really, I don't think, and Margaret, correct me if I'm wrong, until the contract is actually in place, we need to kind of just park it for a little bit. And then that's why we hope maybe the design team could start in the summer. Is that right, Margaret? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm sure all of you have encountered this in your own work at times. The issue has been that the National Renewable Energies Lab person isn't really supposed to be working on it until the money is there, but we can't really do the scope of work to describe what the money's going to do without her time. So it's been a little bit of, one of those awkward situations. So yeah, everyone has a sort of general sense of what a digester could look like, but the specifics, to make sure that we have it set up with the thermometer in the correct place, and is it going to be a vertical? Is it going to be horizontal? Those fundamental things aren't quite worked out yet, and it feels a little weird, to be honest, to have those.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, when the time comes, I'd love to listen into that design conversation or geek out on it. I don't need to necessarily be part of it, but really part of the whole reason I'm here is like, we're trying to figure that out for Vermont right now. And last week or the week before, I did some more research on like, what are people doing with these bag digesters? And B Energy, posted something on LinkedIn that they got one in Rhineland-Pfalz area of Germany that they're weatherized. And I'm like, Willie, what did you do? And they didn't kind of give me the real answer. And then there's this person that's their distributor in Sicily rather, or wherever, Corsica, I can't remember, some island, and they've got it figured out that they're weatherizing it. So I'm trying to track down like, what are people actually doing? Because the picture I saw looked like a cob job. I think that's a technical term, but so I'm really interested in what's being done, because my people here said they're going to do this summer. They're going to build this a weatherized Sistema bio digester. So I want to know what the options are, and if possible, share what you're going to do for Alaska here in a timely enough fashion that they could then use that to do their design. So anyhow, I'm like this, I'm trying to steal from you basically, and share that information back. I haven't heard from the person from Corsica. Oh, we've got it all figured out, but it's not even that cold of a climate. So who cares? I mean, whatever.
an
It's
island
not-
in the
it's-
middle of the Mediterranean?
Yeah, right.
I mean, whatever. Yeah.
And Robin, do you know anything about this? Because you've got a far reach of knowledge. Maybe
There's-
tell Alex what you do, who you are.
Well,
No, we've
You've met?
communicated a little bit already, Robin. So
Okay,
that's great.
perfect.
What I will
Yeah.
do though, so that I'm sharing more, is send you what I found out about the B Energy stuff and this person from Corsica. So I will throw that into where do I put that? An email? What would you like?
IR
It
page.
seems like kind of,
There's an
all
IARPIC page that collects
All right.
all this information. Yeah.
right, fine.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, put something up onto the collective page, but if you want to send me a copy direct, that's fine. I mean,
Okay.
the digester in the back picture that I've put up today, I'm being lazy, it's just what I had up previously. I mean, that's an enormous industrial scale thing, but we also work on small scale sort of back of factory type units and these sorts of things as well. I also get involved in Aberdeen University School of Renewable Energy Engineering. So we can maybe find student design time or just even spare time at the
Okay.
desk if there is any, just to help you through, just talk
Yep.
stuff through. I'm very, very happy to do that. And
Okay.
yeah, I need to take some commercial pressure off my life, so I'm actually happy to talk to you in some downtime, honestly. So just ping me an email.
Okay.
And that's true of the group in general. I'm more than happy to do that. We've got sort of 30 or 40 years of experience just in the room here in terms of designing AD systems and running mass balances and all this sort of thing. And Tom, who's not here, but in the UK, he's not online today, he's also really amenable within Newcastle University. So, just sound us out, we'll help. We do.
Okay.
We earn our money on the commercial stuff, but the reason I like this group is because we're a community and I want to help. So if I can do, just ask the question. Okay.
Thanks, Robin.
I suppose it's worth asking, actually, just from the university end, if anybody in the group has a desk that you want a summer student to sit at, I can then put it back to the university group to say, if anybody's looking for an unpaid placement, then maybe they can come and work with any of you guys. It's just one of these situations that as a student I did, but it's often hard to find somewhere for a student to go to. So if you're happy to host a self-funded student, then let me know, and I'll put it to the group at some point. The summer's not far away.
Well, and
But
to
always
that
a
end,
choice.
I wondered about the money coming from Margaret. Is there any, I don't know, people pay themselves to help with the design process, or I don't know what the funding's allocated for. Is it just for supplies?
Our funding is for supplies and then National Renewable Energies Lab time, because
Time, okay.
it's an interagency agreement where we
Okay.
send a chunk of money to them. So they could have unpaid summer interns, they could do whatever. But I can't break off pieces and do
Yeah, okay. I was just curious.
Shall I start the presentation, or is there other business? that you-
Yeah, is there any reason to wait for Jaime? That was the other question I had about timing of the morning. Margaret,
Yeah, I don't know. That is my question too.
because we're about 20, you said 20 minutes late, because we're about at 20 minutes.
He teaches until
Yeah.
10 a.m. US Pacific time,
Okay,
and then Embry.
10 more minutes. I don't
Leave
want to
the-
waste our time. I mean, I don't want to just sit here. Robin can show us more pictures of giant reactors instead of bag reactors. You're on mute, Robin. There you go.
I'll just change the picture behind me as we go, and then
There we
make it
go. Just a sliding
check whether
slide
you're
deck.
all right.
Right. Some people love their children and pets. Robin has a different focus.
Oh, we've got crazy pets as well. You don't want to see those.
Oh, that's funny. Should we do the presentation?
Yeah,
We're on recording, so
Oh, okay.
it'll
I
be,
can-
it'll be captured for those who also can't be here, popping in late.
good point.
And just apologies, I don't typically use Zoom, so it might take me a little bit to figure out how to share. Oh, yeah. How do you share the slide? There's no share button. Oh, yeah, here it is. Share screen. Okay. Oh, interesting. This is very different. Apologies. I typically use Teams with, and oh, here we go. Okay, share. Can you see that it says participants can now see your screen?
Not yet.
Is that accurate?
We see us.
You see you. Okay.
Yeah.
So you are sharing the screen, but not
Yep.
the presentation.
Maybe just not that. I think when you pull up that share screen, there's probably a choice for which screen you want to share.
Yeah, and I thought I had okay, hold on. I thought I had selected. Let's see.
On my screen top, there looked like to my right of share screen, it looked like a little thing of icons.
Yep. So
There's
Windows
something
entire.
to select in there, and I've got to knock on the door, so I'm gonna put myself on mute. Step away.
Okay, let me just see. Maybe I have. So Jaime might join us by the time I get this going. So maybe this is...
Do you have your presentation open?
Yep, it's open. Yeah.
And you hit share screen, and then you should be able to see.
It
It'll
doesn't
give-
come up. That's the only problem in the selections.
It's weird.
Monica, is your presentation a huge file? Could you maybe email it to Margaret, and Margaret could share her screen, and then you just,
That would, yeah.
sorry to
that would-
volunteer you, Margaret. I would do it, but I need to drop off in a few minutes. And then you could just, next slide, please.
Yeah. Water. Okay, bear with me.
And if it slides, it might be large to maybe just do a OneDrive share.
This should. Okay, just sent it. My ineptitude on being able to share slides. And it shouldn't be that big. It should be, did you receive it? And maybe I'll just start talking, just not to waste people's time. So I I'm a US EPA employee, but I work on a program called the Global Methane Initiative, or GMI. We are an interesting group in that it's a voluntary international partnership that is based, the Secretariat is based out of EPA, and but it's all internationally focused. So we don't do work in the US, which is highly unusual for US EPA as a domestic agency. And part of the program came out of, we had back in the early 90s, we had a landfill methane, well, we still do, but we have a landfill methane outreach program, AgStar. We used to have a natural gas star program, all these voluntary partnerships that dealt with reducing methane emissions. And over the years, countries would come to EPA and ask, how do we do this? How do we learn more about digesters? How do we learn more about methane reduction? And in 2004, the White House needed something to, because the US wasn't working on Kyoto, on CO2, they were like, methane's a great thing to work on. So Methane to Markets, MTEM, was born. And the idea is it's a win-win solution for reducing methane emissions within the oil and gas sector, coal mine methane, agriculture, wastewater, and landfills. And that then rebranded in 2011 to the GMI. So next slide. And we, so there's 5 sectors, and is it not moving?
It'll work, I'll get there.
Okay. So we work on 5 sectors, and the idea is that it's cheaper to reduce methane emissions from these sectors abroad. And the GMI program is based at US EPA's Climate Change Office. So from EPA's perspective, it's a climate benefit. If we can reduce methane emissions in Indonesia, then it's still, we all share the same atmosphere. So it's a win-win for everyone. It's cheaper because it was difficult to do within the US. And the environment is changing. Methane, when we started working on Methane to Markets back in 2004, no one was talking about methane. It was very internationally, it was all about CO2. And therefore, now the environment actually is, methane is a very, very hot topic, and everyone's working on it, but back at that point, we were not. And so you can see on the slide that there are 5 sectors, but we collapsed over time. We collapsed the ag, wastewater, and landfill into biogas because that was the commonality between the 3 sectors. And we were also having some challenges with attracting delegates to come to the meetings. And I think part of the reason is that in some of these particular countries, there's only one person who works on climate and they do everything for climate. And therefore having them come to separate meetings and participating in 5 different working groups was a bit challenging. So we collapsed to biogas, which we're kind of learning is a little bit of a problem because as I said, when you work in different parts of the country, sometimes biogas is not known or they're not interested in it, or because if they're a water person, they're interested in cleaning the water. They're not really interested in energy or climate. Same thing with a farmer. If you're talking about manure management, they're not necessarily thinking about the climate impacts or the energy. And so the conversation becomes more basic rather than technical, which also has been a little bit of a challenge when we've collapsed it, because not necessarily everyone wants to, they're on different levels of talking. So I'm also just showing, this is just showing we have a steering committee. So it's essentially our GMI's board of directors. And we have a chair and 2 vice chairs. Right now, the chair is the United States, and we have India, and we're looking for a second vice chair to fill the vacancy. Canada we just had a rotation. So it used to be Canada, US, and India. Now it's the US stepping into the chair role and India in another country that we're looking for. So next slide. So we have 46 partner countries, and since we've been around for a very long time, we've been able to leverage a lot of funds from different agencies from different countries to work on different projects on methane mitigation. And we have this thing called project network members, which is essentially anything that is not a country delegate. So private sector, university, multilateral banks turns into a project network. And one of the things that we've noticed over time is that there's not a lot of multilateral organizations that work with the private sector. And I think this is one of the strengths of GMI, pulling in different technical companies to work on pilot projects or to work on demonstration projects or to provide webinars, workshops, etc. Over time, we've trained more than 50,000 people since 2004, and we've developed a lot of tools and resources. The other thing that we have been doing, and we are shifting our focus a little bit, but we have reduced methane emissions, 538 million metric tons. And this is a cumulative number from 2004. And back when we started, the clean development mechanism was alive and well. And so there was a lot of incentive to create projects where the CDM could provide funding. So there'd be, so that has gone away. So getting climate funding into projects has been a bit challenging. So we don't have as many methane emission reductions, but we still are striving for that. So next slide.
Ugh. Oh,
that's good. So this is just some of the things that we do. Again, this is kind of a broad, more policy tools, as we're not working as much on trying to get greenhouse gas emission reductions. That is our end goal, but it's a very expensive thing to do. So we have been doing capacity building, which includes workshops, trainings, consultations. We've been trying to do assessments and provide tools such as site visits, pre-feasibility studies, developing tools and models. And then another thing that we do is try to develop and maintain partnerships. So information sharing, I think that's one of the things that we try to strive for by putting on methane workshops, methane conferences, bringing stakeholders together to talk about what you're doing in your country, what you're doing, and so others can learn from that, similar to what this group is all about, right? Not reinventing the wheel every time to work on biogas or to work on methane mitigation within the sectors. Next slide.
Good go.
I know it takes a little while. There we go. I think most of you know the benefits of reducing methane since you are working on AD. These are sometimes when we're working with different countries, as I mentioned before, the climate is not something, maybe they're not interested or not as interested, I should say, about the climate benefits. So we do talk about the benefits of reducing methane in different terms to match the stakeholder. So for the oil and gas or coal, especially coal mine methane, it's about worker safety, minimizing the explosions. And that way it's still doing the same thing. You're getting to the same point, but we're trying to impress upon it that there are other benefits. So our messaging changes with the different audiences, obviously. Next slide. In the Conference of the Parties, I think two years ago, the State Department and the White House launched the Global Methane Pledge, which is the idea of reducing 30% globally emissions by 2030, which is coming up very quickly, to 2020 levels. And so the State Department, the US State Department, has been on a mission to really, really get the word out that reducing methane is really important and we need to do it globally to act on climate. And so this has been their campaign for the last 2 years, and it fits nicely with the work that we're doing. Again, it's a complement. It's it's something that we work together to do, and not just on the GMI partner countries. So right now, the State Department is in this, like, what can we do to show at the next Conference of the Parties and say, hey, this is what we've done. This is what we've been able to achieve. So there is this sort of urgency. And if there are, one of my slides in the next couple slides, we'll be asking, are there any other projects that we would like to connect on and collaborate on, because there is this urgency of how can we work together to speed up and accelerate the reduction of methane globally. So next slide, please. And similar to what we've done before, this is just a snapshot of what the sectors, the oil and gas sector, it has the highest reduction potential. And so it does get a lot of focus globally as well as from the US. Biogas, when you combine it, it is 19.6% reductions. And I think if you look at, one thing that we don't look at through GMI is enteric fermentation. And that's just due to the fact that that's not in our bailiwick. It's a little bit difficult to work on. So if you include enteric fermentation, I think biogas does. Agriculture has a huge emissions source when it comes to methane. And then the last sector is coal mine methane. So those are the 3 areas that we work on. Next slide. I had mentioned a little bit before, we have these subcommittees. So we have a biogas subcommittee that I work on, and we will be bringing together people in 2 weeks' time in Bangkok at the Climate and Clean Air Coalition annual meeting. And the idea is to get countries together to have a technical working group, or just a working group where people can share ideas and we can work on things together on biogas. One of the things that we've noticed is that there has been, we don't get as many, there's not as many people active in it. So if there are I think it's difficult for different countries. If this is my 100% job, but most other countries, this is their extra activity and this is not their main job. And so getting involvement or activities or getting people together has been quite challenging. So if there's any ideas from this group, or if you know people who are interested, I'd love to bring them on board to the subcommittee meeting to share your expertise, their expertise, and work on identifying any projects, any tools that are needed, any technical assistance on regional or national levels within different countries. And just kind of seeing what the needs are and what the partner countries could provide. For example, if there is somebody that has knowledge on digesters in a particular area, then sharing that information is always welcome. Next slide. So I just wanted to give an example of some of the bilateral work that we do. US EPA works on a lot of bilateral work that then is in support of GMI. So GMI doesn't have a trust fund. So the way we represent the work is by US EPA doing work in support of GMI, Environment Canada doing work in support of GMI, and that is then discussed, aggregated, showcased. So Kazakhstan is a country that we've been working in for some time within the fossil fuel area, especially coal mine methane. And then I've been doing some work recently in Kazakhstan on wastewater. And I thought it would be a nice, it's not a polar area, but there is very cold time frames in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. So we started working within the biogas sector on wastewater in 2017, in 2016, 2017, and it was building off of USAID had, they have a lot of work within Central Asia on energy. And so we, GMI/US EPA hooked on to kind of the tail end of their work, 2016, 2017, and have been working with a NGO that is very interested in biogas. And so we've done some measurement studies, some pre-feasibility studies, some roundtable workshops, some road mapping, et cetera. And we are trying to do a study tour with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan on biogas/wastewater and landfills in hopefully November timeframe. So next slide, please. So as I've just mentioned, some of the objectives is to provide technical, analytical, capacity building support, and specifically on the wastewater to energy technology, looking at some of their wastewater facilities. We did do a pre-feasibility study for 2 locations. And what was really interesting is after we did those pre-feasibility studies, we did a technical workshop for the wastewater operators. And a lot of it was, I think they were very surprised. They do have, because Kazakhstan is a post-Soviet Union country, they do have actual wastewater facilities that do have AD systems, but they're very old. And one wasn't running, one is active, but a lot of the operators were kind of surprised to hear that there were AD systems and actually working, and they were dubious that AD systems and biogas capture works. So working kind of on a basic level we did a 2-day workshop on bringing a consultant in and talking about like more the technical aspects of ADs, biogas, and that relates to wastewater. So that's sort of some of the activities that we've done in Kazakhstan on wastewater and biogas. Next slide. So for this group, what I would love, and I've been working with Margaret and Embray over the, I guess, year or two, more than a year or two, a couple of years now. But I think my main request or ask would be if there's any opportunities to share information, if you know of any projects, are there any opportunities to collaborate with your organization, with your community, or if you know of anything that have AD systems with wastewater, with landfills or ag, and if you have any desire to participate in the biogas subcommittee or any other future GMI projects, it would be very welcomed, because I think the idea is to get people to share. Having that knowledge is always very helpful. And that's the point of GMI, is a platform to share. So next slide. And so we do have a website. We also are trying to be as active as possible on social media. We have a globalmethane.org site, so it's not a .gov. So it does look a little different from EPA's website. And the idea for that is because it is a multilateral voluntary partnership, and we are trying to get as much participation from external countries and stakeholders to be able to showcase the information. So again, the website, if there are things missing, if your organization has interesting documents or tools, we'd love to share that information. You do need to sign up for our mailing list, so we try not to spam, so you do have to sign up for it to receive the information. But we're always welcome to put your information up on the website or share your events. If there's tools that you know of, again, we'd love to be aware of that. The wastewater page and the biogas pages are not as strong. So we, again, welcome any feedback, any information that you have to be able to showcase that. So, and I think the next slide is just the last slide, and it's my contact information. And again, I really welcome any reach out, any comments, any feedback, and would love to work with you guys. So thanks for listening.
I'm curious if China has been involved at all. I know that they have cold parts and digesters, but
So they are very, so China's a little bit different. They have quite advanced AD, at least in wastewater. I'm not as familiar with their ag and landfills, but for wastewater, they have very high-tech AD systems that they, it's a bit more of a, when the government of China says we like this, they implement it. So we did do a study tour with some Chinese delegates in 2018. We did a workshop with the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, and we had different stakeholders come and visit LA and Washington, DC, and look at different parts of organic diversion, co-digestion, AD systems. We went to DC Water and met with some NGOs just to get more of a holistic system. And then they brought that back to, the delegates brought that back. And I think they, my understanding is my colleague was working on the landfill side of things. And he said that really galvanized the kind of the interest on doing biogas capture. And so yeah, they have definitely cold climates. It's a bit different in that money is, when they say that we're going to do it, they're going to do it. And it's not really a municipality, it's more of a top-down approach. So, but they're also not really into sharing their information, their data. That's the
part that I was hoping for. I was like, but maybe they could also.
Yeah. They have, they threw up on the screen when I was there years ago about their wastewater data. And I was like, oh, but then, you know, they have the data, they just won't share it because it's they their information. So that's the only kind of challenge, but they are quite active in the space.
Other questions from folks? Do any of the rest of you work at all in this realm? Alex, hand up. That's not from before.
So this working group, I'm like at the risk of like trying to do everything. I'm curious what, if any, involvement you would find helpful from state people. I do have some, and I will send you a couple of case study things. One is a fascinating one that a guy from AgStar did on a long time digester. So case studies are often like, oh, this great new thing. And then 20 years later, it's still there. 10 years later, it's still there. This one is all about the entire history of a 19-year project, including not running anymore and why. So that's fascinating. Then I also connect you with a guy who's been doing case studies or trying to with a contract in Wisconsin. So that might be helpful for you too. I wanted to ask about, and so yes, on the working group offer, whatever that was or whatever that was called, I'm curious about that. I might or might not get involved, but I wanted to ask you and maybe other people here that know the federal ins and outs. And there's this thing called GHG SAT. Anybody heard of that? I was wondering if we can get it. So I dove into, how do you get access to this? Well, there's this whole process where somebody.
Can you tell us what it is, Alex, too?
Yeah, it's a satellite that detects methane.
Oh, okay.
And how do you get access to it? Well, you don't unless you are like part of a federal agency somehow. So I tried to probe the GMI to like, who could get this stuff and request it. I don't see how a state agency would necessarily request it. Anyhow, it looked complicated. I didn't finish figuring it out. And maybe that's not something we need to do, but maybe it is. Maybe it'd be helpful to show, hey, there's a bunch of methane coming out from these places that we can maybe address. Anyhow, just that's another offline thing probably, but I just wanted to mention it.
So satellites are the big thing right now. That's kind of the discussion point on right now. There's this huge push on methane satellite data. GHG Sat is a company. I think the Bloomberg Foundation has funded Carbon Mapper, which is another satellite, and I'm not as aware of, so I might be getting some of the details, but the big picture is Carbon Mapper is trying to collect the data and provide it free. But they're only looking right now at oil and gas facilities. So my understanding is I think the next step would be maybe landfills, looking at other entities, facilities that, but oil and gas is the big one right now. Yeah. So it is kind of, from the US government side, it's a little bit touchy because I think what happens is it might conflict with some of the data that we are, the comparison of the data. It starts becoming slightly problematic with the inventory data, and it's not just the US government. Apparently all governments are starting to get a little bit, how do you reconcile when you get satellite data and you have on the ground facility data and comparing that, and the numbers start becoming off. And then, so there's a lot of, my understanding, my kind of just basic understanding is it's being worked out right now. And there's an organization called the Global Methane Hub, which is a philanthropic new organization, and they're really pushing the satellite conversation, and they are trying to get that to be kind of the forefront, and that's a bit of their pet project to see. So it is coming. And I think it is, the Global Methane Hub is pushing the governments right now, the US government, other country governments, to say, hey, let's try to figure this out with the satellite data. But I think it's still in conversation.
Okay.
And yes to the working group. Thank you.
It's a little bit outside the remit of the chat group, but I would make the point that some of the work we did a few years ago showed that some AD facilities actually only harvest about 60% or less, even what they think are good commercial systems, 60% or less of the biomethane potential of the material. What that actually means is that if you trigger the AD process to create methane, but only take 60% of the methane out as an energy material, then 40% is part of your what you called a fugitive emission potentially, if that material is incorrectly digested, then goes to land. And actually, because of the greenhouse gas value of methane, that makes it worse than actually doing nothing. Because if you've got 40% of methane, which has a 25 times greater value as a greenhouse gas than CO2, then if you just let material compost or just degrade naturally, your CO2 emission would have a lower greenhouse gas impact. So bad AD is actually worse than doing nothing. So this is the sort of thing which I think the AD sector, and from a scientific point of view, you know, the numbers I'm giving there, the 40% value is actually proven in some of our lab work from checking commercial systems. So the 40% value was a published number some time ago, but don't quote me personally. I can give you a link to it. But the point is that this is something I think that the AD sector and the academic side of things is not really looking at properly. In other words, if you're going to do AD, you do need to do it really well. And that just, as I say, it's not cold and high AD specifically, but it's a comment on what you said there. So I can point you in the direction of some of that work. It's a good few years old now.
And I'm curious, and again, I don't know a lot of the details, but has this group worked with the World Biogas Association? And they are talking about standards. I think they're trying to standardize, I think similarly, they don't want bad AD, obviously, right? So they're talking about, and again, I don't know the details of this, but I understand that one of the things that they're working on is trying to make a universal, ADs more universal, having metrics that are similar and being able to calculate on a similar scale between countries and between even between states. So I don't know if this group has talked about that or has any information.
Again, sorry to take the floor, but if you don't mind, I'll just say that the World Biogas Association has been sprung out of the UK Anaerobic Digestion and Bioresources Association. So it's kind of an internationalization of what started in the UK a few years ago. The UK standards that the World Biogas Association really use as a template for what they're proposing came from a thing called a PAS 110, which is a publicly available standard number 110. I was one of the original co-authors of that document, and also it was then used as a template by the American Biogas Council for what they have done, but then they change it a little bit, and you're absolutely right. In the end, different countries do different things, and you end up with something which looks quite similar, but is just tweaked in 20 or 30 different ways. So I think that's probably what you're referring to. And I did help the ABC, the American Biogas Council, look at how to turn that original document into something more understandable within a within a US context. It was obviously already driven by the UK. Again, something that I'm happy to talk to you about.
Hey, Robin, I'm curious about what you were just saying about, so yeah, that's amazing that potentially there's 40% of the methane being emitted from AD facilities. That's really terrible. But so I know there's a lot of push right now in the oil and gas sector to reduce things like leaks and like eliminate the need for venting and flaring by upgrading machinery. And so is any of that kind of technology that's being implemented in oil and gas going to be like directly applicable to AD, just to eliminate, you know, fugitive emissions, leaks and that kind of thing?
Sorry, Jane, were you asking me or Monica?
Well, I guess whoever knows anything. I guess I was asking you initially because
I think
you were the one who said that in the first place.
Yeah, I think the bigger you go, the easier it is to create an AD plant that behaves and is managed like a petrochemical plant, and it's more cost effective. When you're at the smaller scale, then it's a challenge. But if you're making, let's call it village scale AD, then it's tempting to use even fabrics and materials and containment processes and off-the-shelf plumbing systems, which are not really designed for gas holding. And there's the hazard that comes with that as well. I mean, I know a couple of people that have blown themselves up making small scale ADs and so on. So it's, you know, there is a real risk attached to it. But from an environmental point of view, if you get arguably thousands of micro AD units distributed around, you actually do need to be sure that they don't themselves have a negative environmental footprint.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was interesting. Monica asked me a couple of weeks ago something that got me going down this sort of thought path. And in the US context, I think it's very much that wastewater treatment plants, you know, the official goal is reducing nutrients into receiving waters. And there's never been any sort of, you know, goal or objective about reducing air emissions. You know, air emissions are regulated by other in other places and other activities. And so that the two really haven't come together previously. People just haven't been looking. So I'm interested that there is this 40% number, because that's good. That means that people have been looking at maybe outside the US for.
As I say, please don't quote that out of context, because it's important that we don't do our own sector more harm than good. But the point is, some plants do perform at that unacceptable level, and the good ones don't. You know, the good ones do actually do the job that you think they do. But actually, Jane, coming back to what you just asked, it's when you're looking at building commercial scale AD, it's often as not, the plant is sold on price or whatever it is. But just occasionally you come up with a project. I mean, one we did in Sweden, for instance, it was procured by, in this case, a city local authority. And a key factor in the procurement was actually for the technology vendor to offer and guarantee the methane slippage footprint of the plant. That's very rare. Most of them are on, you know, how much gas does it produce? How many tons of material can it take? Can it take solids? Can it take liquids? You know, all the standard construction issues. But it does occasionally arise. And I think my feeling is that in the future, more and more city scale things will be procured on the basis of both carbon footprinting and methane slippage. It has to be a scoring point. You know, you don't get to be a supplier if you don't guarantee this particular level. And then as a group, we also ought to have that as an objective. What in terms of whatever we do, I think that's really important to flag that up.
Yeah, I think it's also a double whammy. And I think as the price of carbon increases, we can't, you know, if an AD plant is losing 40% of its methane, that's also 40% of its economic benefits as well. So it's just not acceptable to be both, you know, you have to pay for the emissions and then you're also not getting the economic benefit from the energy resource.
Not just energy, but also carbon capture. I think what we're also seeing is actually plants being built specifically because of their carbon capture values. And these are then being invested in by international companies, petrochemical companies, and so on, who actually aren't that interested in methane or biomethane because it's such a tiny percentage of their business. But what they are interested in is the economic value of green carbon credits, however you term that from country to country. But they're actually doing AD projects just because of the carbon value, not because of the energy.
Robin, something you said, and maybe it was Monica earlier, it said 40% of fugitive. Is that the worst case? Because something you said led me to believe that it can be tightened up.
The 40% was my figure, and as I say, please don't quote it.
Yeah. But
Unless
just
you
in
understand
general, like
because it is a dangerous number for us.
Yeah.
No, the context was that if you have a ton of material, then it has a biomethane potential of 100 units of biogas, and therefore biomethane as energy. Some commercial plants are only operating at they're doing the anaerobic digestion process, but they're only completing and harvesting 60 units of that biogas. That means 40% or 40 units of that tonnage then goes to land. And because the AD process has started in the digest state, it is a methane value, not just a missed opportunity of energy harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it goes into low oxygen soils, that methane process will continue and will be emitted to atmosphere. No, I don't know the numbers from village scale work and really cheap and cheerful AD systems. This is work that we did on medium-sized, mostly agricultural plant. Not big samples, but we were really hit between the eyes very early on to realize just how inefficient some of them are. But of course, the good ones are in the 98% harvest. In fact, there are some plants, commercial plants, that outperform a laboratory test because the efficiencies of doing it well are actually better than the efficiencies at a lab scale. So there are some oddities in the data there, because you always think that the lab benchmarks what you do, but actually sometimes a commercial plant, when it's built properly, is better than a laboratory test.
I had a Robin. So do the plants know that they're not being efficient, or is it like, I'm just kind of curious, is it sort of like you said before that they're not that interested in it, so they just kind of let things go? Or is it they're just really unaware that these inefficiencies are taking place?
I would say that if you're working on a commercial basis and you're achieving your commercial objectives, or as your business plan promised you, then you cease to actually pay attention to that. So I don't think there is enough of a regime of testing and actually monitoring the future potential. Could you do better? Often people say, are we doing well enough? As opposed to, could we do better? I think that's one way of looking at it.
Okay, that's super helpful.
I don't think there's enough data to really, I genuinely don't think there's enough data, because nobody, either at a regulatory level or at an economic level, has really followed it through, in the sense that if we're doing well enough, we're earning the living we thought we would earn, and the regulator sees a plant in existence and assumes that it's doing a good job, then that's pretty much it.
Okay.
But so saying, I suppose the last point, I know I'm taking the floor here, but the point is that the standards like the WBA standard, the ABC standard, and the ones that I initially did the original writing for, they do have a threshold of achieving the biomethane potential of the equivalent feedstock. But that bar is set quite low.
I was just sharing an article, which is one of the ones that I found that I was learning about what we're talking about now. And it's interesting to see that the sewage pipes may also be a major source. And I'm curious if any of the, you know, drone or satellite data might get a sense of that. It's not really so relevant for cold high AD, except that if that is the case and it's kind of unavoidable, it does, in my mind, make an argument for more on-site management, because that would reduce the amount of organic material sitting in pipes producing methane. And then if there's more on-site, then there's more research and, you know, more of the business case that we're saying is, or I'm hearing, I think is missing to really push people to care and bother to work on these questions. Ah, puppy.
Aw.
It just groans at me constantly when I'm at the house.
You're welcome to join the committee here.
So I just got funding for a project that's sort of tangentially, well, related to methane emissions in a way, not so much to anaerobic digestion, but so we're actually looking, or we're going to be looking at methanotrophic activity. So methanotropes are microbes that oxidize methane. We're going to be looking at whether there is methanotrophic activity in the atmosphere. So in general, we're interested in all kinds of biotransformations that can occur in the atmosphere, but we're focusing on methane, at least as a starting point. Because, and methanotropes specifically, methanotropes are good at oxidizing methane, but they can also oxidize other VOCs, potentially impacting air quality as well. And so, yeah, so we're going to be sampling in several different environments. So like, you know, environments in a gradient of methane that are, you know, things like dairy farms. We're hoping to access some pipeline terminal sites, maybe landfills, wetlands, that kind of thing. And looking at the methane concentrations in those locations and if there's any relationship between methane and the number of microbial cells in the atmosphere and the number of methanotropes in the atmosphere. And then we're going to be, I'm working with an atmospheric chemist who we can actually measure activity under atmospheric conditions. Like, is there any activity by these microbes in the atmosphere? And then trying to enrich some of these really high affinity methanotropes in the lab as well. So yeah, we're interested in methane emissions, but I mean, whether methanotropes in the atmosphere have a meaningful contribution to methane emissions reduction, probably not, but you never know. I mean, in terms of a biotechnology perspective, it could be useful in some enclosed environments potentially, but probably not, you know, outside. But yeah, I just wanted to say that because it's sort of to some extent related.
And Jane, are you looking at places that are, you said wetlands, but so you're looking at man-made as well as looking at emission sources that are both man-made and then natural, I presume.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and then probably as well, we'll compare those to some reference sites, like low methane sites as well.
Super interesting though.
Yeah. It's a bit out there, but government thought it was worth funding, so that's great.
Jane, I'll ask the question of that to, I have an associate who specializes in bioaerosols from both AD sites and composting. I'll ask him if he's ever considered that particular question. I don't have an answer, but I'll see if he has particular programs of capture from some of these sites. So whether he's a microbiologist or whether he's ever looked into any of that, I don't know. I'll ask him. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and I've been learning a lot about methane emissions. I've been writing an op-ed on methane emissions, and oh my gosh, the measurement issue is huge, right? I think in Canada they're estimating like 150 to 200% more methane is being emitted from oil and gas than is actually being reported in the inventories. And how can we aim to reduce emissions if we don't even know what they are?
I think that's the big question, right? The measurements are very different from place to place.
Yeah, I guess I'm because I've been on the water side, I don't know, has there been any sort of incentive or regulation to capture and measure? Is it just, I guess, landfills? You were saying it started with landfills, maybe, and that's where it's most advanced in terms of.
For methane emissions on the air side. So oil and gas. So right now, US EPA is working on, and I think Environment Canada as well, Environment Climate Change Canada. I think there are oil and gas regulations specifically that are methane related that are being developed. And I don't know too much more about that. I know Canada, I think Canada and the US are in coordination. I mean, obviously they're very different, but my understanding is they're both working on regulations, on air regulations. I should specify, but I think it's just oil and gas and landfills right now, and I don't think they've dealt with any other sources, as from my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding, at least from the Canadian context, is we're focusing on oil and gas as the primary target for reducing emissions. And we've committed to, I think, 75% reductions by 2030 compared to 2020. But we're not really looking at agriculture or landfills and other sites. That's not a big target for us. Which seems like a lost opportunity to me, but.
And is that oil and gas sort of refining? So it's already in a system to be managed?
I think it's everything.
Oh, okay. So it could be exploration and extraction as well, because that would be a little more open air, I guess.
Yeah, I think it can be everything. I mean, we don't have too many refineries in Canada. It's more production. So I think it's reducing methane emissions from production facilities and probably some refining facilities, but we do a lot of, or I know at least like historically, we have a lot of like venting and flaring. You can just like drive through the countryside and see flares all over the place. But so I think the main target is to just reduce that.
And Jane, I do think maybe there's my co-chair for the biogas subcommittee is Matt Hamilton from Environment Climate Change Canada. And he works on the air regulatory side. And again, I don't know details about it, but I do think that there are talking about landfill regulations. Maybe not ag, but I think there's thoughts on the Canadian side. But I think it takes a while for regulations to come into play. But I think there is discussion and there's looking at and evaluating. But Matt, if he's, and maybe on a future call, he can talk about some of the landfill, because he is the expert on the landfill side on regulations. So it'd be interesting to hear from him too, if the group was interested.
I learned an interesting fact, which is that pandemic puppies have resulted in a measurable increase in where was it? Measurable increase in animal manure in Washington state landfill. In 2015, 2016, it was 3.5% of the waste stream, and for 2020 to 2021 is 4.8% of the waste stream. Anyway, so there can be ups and downs of landfill contributions. Sorry, that's a little bit of a diversion, I guess.
It's all supposed to be in plastic bags though, right? So isn't it contained?
Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not. I think the methane still gets out.
The bags degrade. All right, anything else to share? Add links. So some of these links that you're sharing back and forth and putting in the Anerobic collective repository. Or ping each other. If there's something that you heard that you want more information about. Thanks, Alex is going to share from Vermont and Wisconsin. Jane's going to keep us in touch with those things in the air. Methanotropic.
Methanotropes, yeah.
Nanotropes in air. I don't know what I'm breathing, but now I'm going to breathe shallow.
They're not pathogens, it's fine. They're good.
I don't know what to be worried about anymore. All right, and we have some people that we identified for summer work for the pilot study when that shakes loose, that Margaret is watching. Hiatus for the program until September, and we didn't really take a vote, but I didn't hear any protests at the top of the hour. Are there anything else on our agenda that we're not covering yet?
Hey, this is Lynn. I'm just curious, just because I live in Alaska, so I am just kind of hoping to get like an update of the pilot as it pertains to anything. Is that possible to kind of send out? I don't know. I mean, interesting notes of consequence over the summer in case, you know.
Yeah. I mean, once we get the money, I'm going to be wanting to yell and dance. So yeah, I can definitely.
Yeah. And you know, I'm in Anchorage, and usually you have to fly through Anchorage. There are some direct flights to Fairbanks, but just 10 minutes from the airport.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, if something does get going, I wouldn't mind just flying up to Fairbanks to see it. That's possible. So yeah, just would be. Yeah, like to just be updated, but I don't really think I have much to contribute at this stage in terms of technical merit.
It sounds like we've got a road trip. We need to get up there.
Exactly.
Ferry out of Fairhaven, Washington, Seattle. Get on the train in Anchorage and go up to Fairbanks, right? Don't they have a biogas powered train?
There is a train in the summer, but it kind of takes a while.
I'm down for that.
That sounds
good.
fine.
All right. Well, thanks, Lynn. We'll see you.
Right.
Well, one of the points of the group is that, of course, we have applied for the NATO funding. Whether we ever will get it, we don't know. And it was on the agenda for today, but we don't expect to hear anything until the autumn anyway.
Okay.
And that is supposed to get us all to Fairbanks, Alex.
Yes, exactly. That would be nice.
Okay. Hopefully more in autumn, September than autumn, end of November. It'd be a different road trip.
If you're going somewhere, you should go when it's when it's different from everywhere else.
When it's classic Alaska conditions.
Yes.
Look for your puffy coats on sale today.
Absolutely.
You don't already have that wardrobe.
I'm dreaming of a white Halloween.
Yeah, right.
Well, a few years ago, a client asked me to go to Iceland, and they said, you should come in the summer. And I said, no, I don't want to come in the summer. I want to come when it's ice in Iceland, because that's what you expect. So that we went in February, but that's another story.
Nice. And Robin has another background. Thank you for
I know I've changed a few of them. The one that's up there, up right at the moment. That's one that we're building in the north of England right now. So that's a picture from, I think, 2 weeks ago or so. So that's about 80,000 tons of mixed municipal waste that will go through that.
Wow.
And Monica, there are very, very few waste facilities actually noted, certainly in the European context, on the map from your organization. So we need a few more of them, at least bookmarked, because there are downloadable fact sheets about all these sorts of plants. They already exist online, so we can just send you links to 15 or 20 projects of that type.
That would be very welcome.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Monica, did you have any observations about the polar water, wastewater sort of military focus group that you and I both attempted to see whether they have any information that would be relevant for us?
I think the last meeting that I attended was definitely security focused. That is what I've known. I mean, obviously that's, so it didn't seem as, yeah, I think being maybe on another couple just to see if they talk about more environmental projects, but I think the last one, it was definitely about their security focus that I was on last time, which I didn't find that useful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Monica, did you see the NATO application? Because, of course, the program that we applied for is a Science for Peace. And on the face of it, it's not military, but NATO is a military-based organization or focused. So there's quite a lot of text that went into that application about things like community benefits of out-of-country military bases, leaving no footprint at military bases, stuff like that. So, and also off-grid energy, of course, which is the basis of Chad as a group. So if I'm not sure if the application whether it actually went up on the IARPC web pages or not, but if not, then that sort of text was written if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I think it just happened to be the presentation. So I've provided a GMI presentation, and then there was another gentleman that provided presentation. And to be honest, I can't quite remember what it was about, but it definitely was about security in the colder polar region. And so I think I probably tuned out a little bit because it wasn't relevant to my work. It was fascinating to even know that such groups exist. I have to say that was kind of one of the things that Margaret has opened my eyes to, all these different organizations that deal with environmental cold climate systems. So I can see where there could be connections. I just didn't, I think we probably need to make the linkage a little bit more. Maybe this group brings that in, but at the time I just didn't see that connection. It wasn't very obvious.
I just want access to their research budgets, really, that's what I want.
And
It's fun because Norway and and the other sort of circumpolar nations.
it looks like Lynn dropped off. Did she? Or is she on another screen for me? Yeah.
No, I think she's dropped off, and I'm going to have to do the same in a minute.
All right. And Embryo's back. Welcome back. Kind of wrapping up thoughts. Any other agenda items that I've missed? I was going to ask Lynn if she got the information she wanted. I came on about a minute late. So Margaret, I don't know if you talked about sort of where we are timeline for unleashing the money. We've been given the money, but it's all in the interagency.
Yeah, it's still interagency lawyer.
Federal
Terms
people
and
talking to each
conditions.
other, which could take years. And then by then the 2-year money faucet will be turned off. So I don't know how that's all advancing or if it's being taken into consideration.
I'm working on it. Max is working on it. He's also getting married
Okay.
next week. So he's taking a little time off next week for that. But yeah, we're both pushing
Okay.
as much as we can.
So Len was offered to go somewhere this summer, but I was thinking, I don't know that the summer is gonna actually be the right timeline. You might want to just connect with her about that, Margaret, and she's not waiting to hear when to book a flight or a biogas train or a ferry from Fairhaven. We've got lots of multimodal transportation. We'll do the Great American Race to Alaska, see who gets there first. Or has the best pictures, I guess, would be the metric, because we know who'd get there first. Fine. All right, anything Embry that you've got? You went off and got us more money and names and lights.
I wish. I went off and had a 45-minute orientation on cat herding.
Great. Always make you appreciate real work when you have those opportunities. Yeah. Anything else? Alex is saying goodbye. We're all done today. Sorry, Jaime wasn't able to join us, but we do have the recording. We'll return the recording off. Embry, do you control that? Or Margaret, who started that? Thanks, everybody. Have a terrific summer. As needed basis, you've got everybody's